I have been excited since I got the news that the next group of people were going to come and talk with us today. Dr. John Hutton, Greg Szumlas, and Elizabeth Edwards are all part of this next session. Elizabeth is on the way. She was driving down from Cincinnati and got stuck in some traffic, and she's frantically trying to be here. So she may come in with her hair on fire here a little bit, but we're not sure. We started playing it by ear. So I thought what I would do is tell you a little bit about each one of these guys and Elizabeth and what we want to talk about today. And then if Elizabeth can make it in, it'll probably be very close to the end. If she doesn't make it in by the end of the session, what we may do, we have a general session in here after this one. That's our staff discussion, group discussion session. And so if Elizabeth can make it by the start of that one, we may just peel out a few minutes out of that and let Elizabeth talk to you a little bit too. I don't want you to miss any one of them. They're such fabulous people to have with us, and we greatly appreciate them being here. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Hutton first. He is the assistant professor in the Cincinnati Children's Hospital Division of General and Community Pediatrics and Reading and Literacy Discovery Center. In addition to being what I'm calling a world-renowned pediatrician. But he really is a world-renowned pediatrician and researcher. Dr. Hutton is also the owner of Blue Manatee Bookstore, has been for 16 years, and as well as being an author of 24 children's books. Many of them are promoting healthy themes. He's worked very closely with Reach Out and Read. He's the spokes doctor for the Read Aloud campaign. Everybody heard the Read Aloud campaign? Yeah, we're going 2 minutes there. And he is going to talk with us today about some truly fascinating work that he's been doing with fMRI brain scans and research demonstrating the impacts of shared reading and home literacy environment on young children. And we're thrilled to have him today, as well as we're thrilled to have Mr. Greg Szumlas. Greg, I'm going to flip over. I have to read through my daughter's crayon. Made notes on here, and then she decided to color it. So, Greg is the assistant professor at Cincinnati Children's, has been for 20 years, and works as an attending physician in the Pediatric Primary Care Center. Greg also serves as the medical director of the hospital's Reach Out and Read program and coalition, as well as works directly with the Imagination Library work. And for those of you who may have heard or read a little bit about the work in Cincinnati, it's a beautiful marriage of all of the benefits of Reach Out and Read and the Imagination Library in tandem, and they've done a really wonderful job. And Elizabeth, who's on her way, was really my first conduit to all of this. Elizabeth called me up and introduced herself. At the time, she was the founding manager of a venture philanthropy group called Every Child Capital. And she said, Jeff, we are interested in investing in children in Cincinnati, and we've looked at, she said, we've done extensive research across the board on programs that we can implement and scale in Cincinnati. They're going to have an impact, and Imagination Library is one of them that we would like to do. Obviously, Reach Out and Read is another one that they are working in tandem with it. And there's one other one. You were probably great. There was one other one that was under consideration at the time. I can't recall. But, so anyhow, she said, I'd like for you to come up and talk to a group of people and figure out how we can do this. And I went up there, I was telling Dr. Hutton at lunch, I walk into this room, and it is the who's who of leadership in Cincinnati. Now, all of the players were at the table. And they've done a really fabulous job at coordinating this work from the very beginning. Elizabeth's role in that was her venture philanthropy group said, we want to put up $1 million and fund this tandem effort in Cincinnati for 3 years, and also had engaged Cincinnati Public School System and said to them, if we can launch and implement these programs together and do an evaluation that shows the impacts on children that are arriving in your school system, such to the effect that it lowers costs for you, like your remedial literacy investments. Would you be interested in funding this? And they said, absolutely. So I think we're in year 2 of a 3-year plan, so we have certainly work to go. But you have the coordinators and the investors here today. Before we get into that story, we would be remiss if we didn't invite Dr. Hutton down here to come and talk about the great work that they're doing in Cincinnati, that he's doing in Cincinnati, that supports the underpinnings of all of this and demonstrates the impacts from the perspective of science. And so I'm very, very pleased to welcome Dr. John Hutton.
Thank you, Jeff, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks to Jeff and Jane and the whole Imagination Library group for inviting me down. My biggest challenge is decide if I want to walk around like a crazy person like this, or up on stage jump around behind the podium like a crazy person. So I'm going to maybe do a little bit of both. I first learned about Imagination Library when I was fortunate to be invited to an event in Middletown, Ohio. They were launching a site there. And I got to meet a lot of the really wonderful, dedicated people there. Lane Garber's was the point person, and saw the first Dolly Parton's video. I, at the time, hadn't heard much about Imagination Library when I saw her pitch and where she's coming from this program, from her own background, and how important books are to her and to her family growing up. I was sold for sure. It's an incredible organization, so you guys should be very proud to be part of it. And let's see. So then fast forward when the getting to know Elizabeth, when we were looking at bringing the group to Cincinnati, I was sort of all the connecting those dots, and so it's really a fun little trajectory. So it's always really I'll just do this. It's always a little risky to put the brain science talk right after lunch, which is sort of you wonder if you go from lunchtime to nap time, and then sort of, but we'll see how we do. All right, so I want to talk a little bit today about, a lot of people view reading, especially reading to kids, as a really nice thing to do if there's time. It's a happy thing. It's got lots of fuzzy memories. But what we're trying to do at Cincinnati Children's is really underscore the importance of reading as a health issue and how it really impacts a child's developing brain, and hopefully with some of this evidence be able to make a better case to funders and parents and others that starting reading early as possible is going to make a big difference long term for how children's brains come together. So I'm going to stand behind the computer a little bit now and flash forward. I am a frustrated novelist at heart, so if I have a few cute little phrases like story, synopsis, forgive me for that. All right, so I do have a few disclosures. I do own an independent children's bookstore called Blue Manatee, which is one of the things that's really got me excited about reading, not so much because I make any money at it, but because it really gives me access to a lot of families and seeing the kids every day coming in. And the kids that we see in the bookstore are sort of the haves, the kids that have access to books, whose parents are buying the books, grandparents are buying the books. But then you go over to the clinics where I work in the more underserved population, you see the have-nots. And it's a way to keep access to all children from all walks of life, and how books are universal that our kids should have access to. I also do, I'm a spokes doctor for Read Aloud 15 Minutes, and I regularly do collaborate with cats, dogs, chickens, hippopotamus, foxes, talking trucks, and tractors, wizards, wild things, wimpy kids, etc., all with explicit interest in getting kids to unplug and read. But I don't receive any financial compensation. Okay, this is what really makes me tick. This is me as a child. It's a portrait of the scientist as a young man. When I wasn't playing in the mud, I was reading. But I want to start the talk with a little bit of a pop quiz. So looking at this, everybody recognizes this wonderful book. But really, what is it? Think about sort of what it means to families. Is it a test preparation manual? By reading this, you're going to get kids ready for college. Is it a nostalgic complement to videos and apps? Is it a brilliant way to make a toddler less fussy? A means to channel anxiety about our planet in peril? Or is it a catalyst for human engagement? What do you think? All of the above. This is great. All right, so I try to make the case that it's more than just the words and the pictures. It's what brings the grown-ups and kids together. That's the secret sauce of the whole shared reading process. Is when grown-ups and kids come together and spend time together and talk and share language and feelings, then good things happen. As many of you may know, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and I'm a pediatrician, as is Dr. Szumlas, has had recommendations officially since 2014. It's surprising to know that was when AAP, the sort of Jedi Council of Pediatricians, first came forward and made an official recommendation. And basically, a couple of the key points are here. That first, that pediatricians should encourage daily shared reading beginning as soon as possible after birth, and a lot interpreted at birth. Which, the reason for that is that stimulates optimal patterns of brain development and strengthens parent-child relationships at a critical time in child development, which in turn builds language literacy and social emotional skills that last a lifetime, which is all wonderful. I actually started my research looking at this question, particularly the last part, that reading builds language literacy and social emotional skills that last a lifetime. I really wanted to dive into that and get a sense of, is there, what's the brain science there? How can we show that reading has this long-term effect on the brain? But it's also a couple things to keep in mind. That AAP recommends daily reading and that it start really early during this critical developmental stage. And this is the bottom's a picture from a clip from Read Aloud 15 Minutes that has the dad starting to read to the child during the birth process, and the mom's like, "What are you doing? This is, get out of here. This is really important for my baby's brain. We've got to do this." Anyway. I don't know how that would go over in real life, but it'd be interesting to see. So the other, really an important associated recommendation from the AAP is screen time. Screen time really is the elephant in the room for parent-child interaction. It's increasingly gets in the way. And yes, screen-based applications can be beneficial. There's some great things out there, but it's important to remember that there's a time and a place for screen-based activities. And the AAP recommendations on screen time related to little kids include a couple of important things I want to point out. One is that it be avoided before about 18 to 24 months old, and that TV and screens be discouraged in sleeping areas. And the reason for that being that because of their immature symbolic memory and attentional skills, infant and toddlers cannot learn from traditional digital media as they do from interactions with caregivers, such as through books. All right. So now the reason that I'm pointing out these guidelines is before really diving into the brain science, I want to give a little bit of a reality check of sort of how are we doing at the very early stages of childhood in terms of getting parents on board with these recommendations. And we recently finished a randomized controlled trial looking actually at comparing a children's book to brochures for safe sleep education. And at the same time, we asked parents really what their plans are to start reading, and then at the same time, the plans to allow their infants to start watching television. We asked this question prenatally, and then we compared it to what was going on at 2 months old. This is 2 months old. These are very young infants. And our findings were really interesting in terms of framing the dialogue. How are we doing in those first couple of months? And first of all, what we found out is that parents, for the most part, we're doing a pretty good job reading. Most were reading at 2 months. And this was a very low-income sample, very high-risk population. About 80% were reading at 2 months. However, reading was relatively infrequent. It was about 1 to 2 days per week. On the other hand, the downside was that most were also allowing their infants to watch television. About 68% had started allowing their infants to watch television and putting them in front of the television, basically. And about half of them were letting their infants watch every day. So this really just shows the push and pull between reading and TV and how these two activities can be sort of at loggerheads with one another. As far as the reasons for this, and we asked parents, what do you think might get in the way of reading to your child? What do you think would be an issue? And Imagination Library is at its core about getting books in the family's hands, and we thought that might be one of the barriers, and it was. Prenatally, the parents thought, about 12% of them thought there wouldn't be enough books. The majority thought there wouldn't be any problems. But then at 2 months old, and sort of the right side of the screen here, far and away the greatest reason, barrier to shared reading was time pressures. When the baby's here, all of a sudden it becomes difficult. There's other things to do. I've got to get food on the table. I've got to clean the house. I've got to check my email, whatever it is. And about that report of increasing time pressures and being too busy to read went up from about 24 to 37%. And so it's something to keep in mind in terms of really our job to reinforce that reading is something more important to do than just if there's time. It should really be worked into the day. If we read aloud 15 minutes, just 15 minutes a day, just really make that part of the daily routine, and it's really going to pay dividends. Surprisingly, access to children's books was decreasingly cited, and maybe that's because we're doing such a good job getting books out there, but a minority cited that as a problem. However, in this population, at 2 months, the average number of books in the home was only about 5, which really isn't too terrible. Okay. So in terms of perceived importance of reading, we also asked, how important is reading to your infant, and also how important is allowing them to watch television. This is comparing between prenatally and 2 months old. And we found out that the perceived importance of reading was moderating at that point, between birth and 2 months. Most were saying, oh, it's really important prenatally, and then at 2 months they said, that's pretty important. However, on the other hand, television was increasingly viewed as important. And this speaks to the marketing power of television for young children, that it's perceived as being healthy for their development and educational television and all that, whereas it's very contrary to the guidelines. So it's just really something to keep in mind, that the problem with television and other screen-based media for infants is it's one way. I mean, the child's seeing things going on, they're hearing things, but they're not interacting with the person. They're not having the opportunity to share feelings or language. So we have lots of work to do there. All right, so as you know, parents would say, the child's first and most important teachers, and grandparents, of course, as well. And really what we're trying to get at, and I know in Imagination Library as well, is that the earlier we can start encouraging parents to interact with their children through books, the better. The reason for that is that, and here's the brain part. So really by far the most robust stage of brain development is in the first 5 years. Babies are born with more brain cells than they'll ever have. And then there's this very, very rapid period of synaptogenesis, which is brain cells connections coming together, that peaks for some core skills really in the first few months of life, and then for language peaks at around a year old, and then there's a process of pruning, which is language is a bit like sculpture. You sort of the child will make a bunch of sounds and sort of figure out what sounds are and start to put them out in the world, and then through this back and forth process with the caregiver, they'll realize that those sounds have meaning and those sounds form words. The first sounds being vowels, the cooing, and then the consonants with the babbling, and then putting them together in words, and then sentences, and then you're off to the races. But really the first 5 years, right when Imagination Library is involved, as along with Reach Out and Read as well, is really where the action is in terms of the most dynamic stage of early brain development. So as a result, it does behoove us to start early. Again, those sensitive periods of brain development that really make a difference, whether it's language or emotional control or a sense of being loved, really do peak in those first few years of life before kids get to kindergarten. So if we're waiting until kids get to school, we're really wasting a lot of really important opportunities to make a difference in terms of how that wiring comes together. So both Imagination Library and Reach Out would be good times to get involved. I like this slide as well. Really, I feel very often we have our priorities backwards in terms of what we're spending a lot of money on for a lot of social programs, and things like prisons and job retraining, things like that, which are all very important. But what if we spent that same amount of money in sort of programs to develop babies' brains, early parenting and reading programs and quality childcare, things like that might have a bigger potential to make an impact on the brain. And again, Imagination Library is right where it should be there. So to sort of frame the dialogue, a lot of the work that I do in terms of figuring out how the early experiences shape the brain involve really supporting parts of the brain that are involved with what are called emergent literacy skills, those really basic building blocks to help children learn how to read. And emergent literacy breaks down into a combination of skills, which is things like phonological awareness, alphabet, vocabulary, knowledge, which is a background knowledge of what the world is all about, sort of how the world works, what animals are, things like that. And then attitudes, importantly, do kids like reading? Do they want to be read to? Do they want to become readers themselves? That are all precursors to being successful readers and writers, and all that involves beautiful brains. So here we go. So reading, a lot of people are surprised to hear, is not a natural skill. Humans evolved over millennia to do all kinds of things, to walk and talk and explore the world, but we really didn't evolve to read. Reading is an invention that's really only about 6,000 years old. As a result, it really hasn't been time for the brain to develop its own sort of reading network right out of the box. So that's why babies need to be taught how to read and they need to be exposed to reading. It's because actually what goes on is brain networks that evolve for other purposes, specifically language, vision, attention, and association of higher order concepts, have to be knit together in this amazing patchwork in the first sort of 5 to 7 years, and then eventually, almost by magic, an actual reading network develops, but it's because other networks were brought together. And it happens in a predictable sequence in typically developing readers. Kids that struggle can struggle for different reasons. Most struggle because they don't have enough access to books and readers, which we call environmental reading difficulties, but there's also organic reading difficulties, which are otherwise known as dyslexia, that are more a result of something that we're only beginning to understand, where the wiring doesn't come together properly for genetic reasons or others. But really all this has to happen in order for reading to develop through sort of healthy, consistent stimulation in the home. All right, so the reading network here, this is a little bit of a confusing side. It looks like a raisin, but it's not. It's not a walnut either. This is the left hemisphere of the brain, and the left side of the screen is the front, the right side of the screen is the back. And the green dots are sort of parts of the brain that are involved with what's called semantics, which is understanding what stories are about. The orange dots are what's called phonological networks that are more about how sounds come together to form words. And then the yellow is attention, blue is more vision, and sort of all these little dots need to be knit together to develop a reading network. And what we're going to show here is that different types of reading exposures early on can differentially stimulate how these networks develop, both the individual components and then bringing them all together. And a great quote here is that neurons that fire together wire together. So basically those early experiences where kids are seeing books, hearing words, that all gets their neurons firing. And as a result, the white matter tracks that connect these neurons are myelinated, which is basically the wrapping in the wires in the brain, and it forms stronger connections that can last a lifetime. So this early stimulation really makes a difference in terms of healthy wiring in the brain. In the process, the fancy term is called biological embedding, which is you can use that with your senators and get them to give you the money. All right. So introducing a really important concept here of the what we call home reading environment. What is the home reading environment? So it really breaks down into two main categories. One is quantitative aspects of the home reading environment, basically things you can count. That would be access to books, how many books are in the home. You'll see that a lot in the literature. Reading frequency, how often is a parent reading to a child or a caregiver. And then the other side of it is more qualitative things. These are harder to measure, and there's not quite as much research out there because it's just harder to do these studies. Things like how interested is a child in reading, how interested is the parent in reading, and then engagement, that sort of dialogic reading. Who's heard of dialogic reading in here? So that's great. Dialogic reading is actually a method that was developed originally for lower income, more underserved populations to encourage that back and forth sort of reciprocal dialogue through the book, more than just reading the words in the book, but creating a conversation. And it's really, really a powerful way to get the child talking. And the strongest benefit of dialogic reading is expressive language from the child. And it's not surprising because through encouraging the child to talk about what they're hearing in the book, you're encouraging them to practice their own language and their own words. And that helps reinforce those brain connections and that biological embedding. Everyone's going to learn that term. And then the other aspect that's increasingly brought into play is format. Is the child reading on a screen or are they reading in a book? And there's lots of controversy about whether that matters, and we're looking at that too. Okay, so and then importantly, different groups come at different aspects of this whole scenario. On the quantitative side, Imagination Library is square in the access to books box, which is amazing. And these obviously overlap a little bit, but for the most part, that's their main wheelhouse. Reading frequency, read aloud 15 minutes, and you've got interest in reading, Raising Your Reader is a great group. Engagement, that dialogic, there's Get Ready to Read talks about that, so does Reach Out and Read, and really all these groups working together to touch on different components. And what we're going to show is these different components matter in different ways. So what we do at Cincinnati Children's is we use a tool called functional MRI, which is a really fancy way to verify what most grandparents already know, which is that reading is good for kids. But anyway, what we do is starting with the behavioral evidence that reading environment makes a difference, mostly in oral language, and sort of, we know reading really strongly develops language. And we tend to look at preschool-age children, and we bring them in to our labs. We use what's called a story listening task. We have kids go into the MRI scanner, and we've done different tasks, but we generally use a task where we present a story through headphones that's age appropriate, and then we see how their brains light up to the story when we apply different factors in their environment as predictors of activation. So both those quantitative factors and qualitative factors, to see how those factors are related to how the kid's brains light up in the scanner. And then from there, we can try to point at, okay, well, these different quantitative and qualitative factors make a difference in terms of how these different brain networks are supporting reading development and those basic emergent literacy skills. So the first study that we did, this came out a couple years ago, got a good bit of attention. We looked at the quantitative boxes. So we asked parents, and this was all 3 to 5-year-old children, a kind of a diverse group, and we asked a screener asking about number of books in the home, frequency of reading, types of books read, and then we applied those scores during that story listening task, and then we looked at how these kids' brains lit up in the scanner. And what we found, so here I've got side by side that model of the brain on the left, the different brain networks. Remember, the green is the semantic, the orange is phonological, and then the red is visual, and yellow is attention. And then, lo and behold, what we found is that the part of the brain that lit up most significantly in the kids that had stronger quantitative measure of reading environment, access to books and frequency, lit up in this posterior part of the brain on the left in an area called the posterior temporal occipital association cortex. And this is a fancy term for part of the semantic reading network. It's basically a part of the brain that brings together visual and auditory stimulus to help with visual imagery, helps kids imagine what's going on in the story. These are all parts of the brain that are involved with vision. And at first we thought this was a little strange because our task doesn't involve any visual. There's no pictures. It's all listening to stories. So this is a picture of kids imagining what's going on in the story. And we found that kids that had stronger access to books were read to more often when they were little, had greater activation in the part of the brain that would help them do that. And the reason that's important is that kids that build up that part of the brain and that wiring back there to help them imagine what's going on in the story when they're hearing the stories, later on will be better able to read books without pictures. They'll be able to hear stories and sort of see in their mind's eye what's going on and understand what's going on. So this is really important to help build those connections early on. And I put Imagination Library in that box back there. That's basically where you live. So that was a pretty powerful finding. And this was the first study to ever show that early reading environment makes a difference in brain function, which is why I got a good bit of attention. So we were excited about that. But what about reading quality? So that was our next question. So we know that the quantity matters. What about the quality? What about the interactivity? Because knowing that kids have a lot of books and read often doesn't really tell you how engaged that process is. It could be really boring reading. It could be really dry and dull, and the child's falling asleep and whatever. So we really wanted to look at that. So the second study we did, and this should be published, we think, in the next few months. We looked at, we brought in parents and children. These were low-income parents and their 4-year-old children, and we did a video observation of them reading Little Engine That Could with their child. And then we scored the reading observation using dialogic criteria and some other measures of lap sitting, letting the child turn pages, how many questions were asked, how rich was the dialogue, and then we applied those scores as a predictor in another imaging study. And this is some screenshots of some of the reading that went on. Some of the parents did an excellent job, were really interactive and engaged. Some showed no interest whatsoever, even though we prompted them and said, here's a book, want to go ahead, you can take this home, and they just didn't want to do it, even if the child asked them. So it really showed us we have some work to do to really get parents to buy into that reading process. This one on the top left, the mom read to her child, but she also was checking her phone at the same time. We found that was the number one barrier, was the parents were more often checking their phone, or too often checking their phone instead of reading, which is why I brought in the screen time guidelines. But basically the themes we saw were a couple of things. For the most part, the dialogic-ness of the reading was fairly low. Some parents, again, did a great job, but for the most part it was fairly, we saw what we call freight train reading, just reading start to finish without taking any pauses. Some struggling on the parents' part in terms of their reading fluency. You can tell some of these parents weren't great readers. Pop quizzing, where they read freight train and then ask a few questions on a page and then keep going without much dialogue. And then the parents being just kind of stressed and flat. And then that cell phone was a problem. But again, we did get these scores, which were overall low, but we applied them as a predictor in the story task to see what happens. And what we found was pretty interesting. So we found here, we're in the left hemisphere again, and we found a different part of the brain. The last one, as you remember, the quantity lit up back here, sort of in this like semantic area. But in terms of the quality scores, we found, again, this is left hemisphere, this is where language lives. The activation was in the front, sort of up in these anterior parts of the brain, and the temporal and frontal lobes in parts of the brain that support a number of things. One is expressive language. This is what's called Broca's area. For any of you that know brain science, this is sort of the hub of expressive language. This is where really the coordination of expressive language overall. Also, complex language processing, connecting social emotional feelings with language, not just what the words are, but what they mean, and what they mean to the child. And then on sort of some of the upper blobs, this is sort of working memory attention, sort of up there in the far left top. So executive function, expressive language, social emotional processing through the quality. Makes sense. This is the nurturing, shared reading, back and forth reading. So what we're showing here is the quality of reading, which is something we can teach, makes a big difference in terms of the robustness and richness of processing of the stories. Okay, so that's important. What about the child, though? Okay, so we're looking at the mom, we're looking at the books. What about the child factors? What about their interest level? Does that matter? Well, we looked at that too. So we also, during the same observation, we scored not just what the mom was doing, but what the child was doing. How engaged were they? Were they asking questions? Were they focused? Did they want to do something else? Were they, really what was their overall engagement level? And what we found here, this is kind of a tricky slide. That scary looking thing on the left is actually a part of the brain called the cerebellum. So who knows where the cerebellum is? Anyone heard of the cerebellum? So it's in the back. It's sort of right back here. And it's a part of the brain that's often thought of as supporting movement, but it actually increasingly has been found to support learning of any kinds of new skills. We described it in a paper that just came out a few weeks ago as a turbocharger, so the storytime turbocharger. And what we found is that kids who were more engaged during shared reading, these are 4-year-olds, had stronger activation in this part of the cerebellum that specifically connects with language and executive function areas. So the thinking is it's not a direct effect on those areas themselves, but this is sort of the booster. That engagement, that focus process, the kids that have more exposure to reading, that are more interested in reading, some of them will have organic factors where they just are more interested in reading, but some, it's trained. If they grow up thinking reading is fun, reading something to look forward to, they build those routines of reading, they're more likely to have activation in this part of the brain that boosts their support for these other skills. So this is another piece of that patchwork quilt that brings together the brain to help learn how to read. So this is a pretty exciting finding too, and it allows you to say the word turbocharger when you're talking about reading, which is pretty fun. So especially in some southern states, whatever, down to Kentucky, so we like turbochargers. Or Michigan. Anyway, so again, this is part of the brain that's very important for skill acquisition and learning. So as far as a recap, so this is what we have so far. We know that access to books, frequency, those quantities seem to support imagery and understanding. There's another study I didn't show here that we're kind of putting together showed some possible benefit on phonological processing, but it's not quite as strong. And then the quality seems to really affect those robust sort of social, emotional, complex language, expressive language, working memory. And then the child engagement seems to help that turbocharger to kind of boost the whole process. And that makes sense. Kids that are really locked in at story time, like one or two of you are, I don't know about the rest of you, are really, the cerebellums are really kicking in here. So they're more likely to learn more out of what's going on. Question that always comes up though, what about iPads? So I get this all the time. Like, any newspaper, whatever, they talk about reading, whatever. So, I've got an iPad, and that always comes up. So we actually are looking at that currently, and this is a very complicated question. We're currently doing a study, and we're writing it up now, where we presented stories, 3 to 5-year-olds, with stories in 3 formats. We presented one that was just audio, one that was audio with pictures, a traditional picture book, and one that was fully animated. A lot of the books you'll get on iPads tend to have animated features where you press a button, something happens, bells and whistles, all this stuff. There's some evidence in behavioral literature that gets in the way of comprehension. It distracts the child. And the reading experience, even if it's with a caregiver, tends to be more about the device than about the parent and the child together, because the child knows. They've seen their parent on the device, and they know there's email there, and they know there are apps there, and there's usually features that allow the parent to click a button and then hand the device over, and then the book reads to the child, with things going on. What does that mean? We don't really know. But anyways, we're looking at this question in terms of how do kids' brains activate when they're hearing stories in these 3 different formats? And the answer is, we're still scratching our heads about it, but it's really complicated. So these are we call these dream catchers. These are basically brain networks that are all coming together to support narrative comprehension. And I don't want to bog you down in this too much because this is sort of in the weeds, but for the most part, what we found is in the 3 tasks, the big difference is in 2 main things. One is in the more animated the task, or the more visual, the less internally generated visual imagery comes into play. There's increasing dependence on primary visual networks that are about watching and seeing, where it's just tracking. You're sort of, these are these hardwired visual areas in the back of the brain. Internally derived imagery gets increasingly shut down. The other thing that increasingly gets shut down is a part of the brain that supports what's called self-referential processing. So what does this mean to me? That sort of internal reflection tends to get shut off with increasing animation. The other thing that happens, strangely, is vision and language tend to separate. Increasing animation tends to create sort of these 2 parallel processing tracks where language is over here, vision's over here, but they're not really talking to each other. And so the magic seems to be in the illustrated picture books. I call this the Goldilocks effect, where just audio in these young kids tends to leave them they get a little, maybe it's not quite enough. They can't quite grasp everything, and you don't get quite a strong activation in the imagery. Illustration, they have just enough through a picture to give them an anchor to what's going on, and then they pull all kinds of imagery in themselves. So they add to the picture by bringing it to life. And then animation tends to shut things down. So anyway, that's that. So, more to come. And we will definitely be publishing on that at some point, but we'll see. Just got to bring it together. So basically, bringing you back to this home reading environment picture, what we've done now, or what we hope to do, to really reinforce the case of reading as a critical aspect of brain health and early brain development, something that should be invested in early to promote long-term brain health, is allow us to connect underneath these boxes and organizations these nice little brain pictures. So you've got all right, so all these things matter, you've got all these great groups working on it, this is how it helps the brain, give us some money. This is like a cheerleading session. All right, and for the sake of time, I was going to, and so what I would say is probably the biggest challenge here, I think is probably 2. I think that Imagination Libraries does an incredible job getting books into kids' hands and should continue to do so. That is critical. If that's not done, then everything else is, waving your hands around. But given that that's, really there's fairly well established, or it's really in process. I know it's not easy. I think the biggest challenge might be here, in terms of the dialogic reading, in terms of training parents on how to read interactively with their kids. And that's where programs like Reach Out and Read come into play, that allow dialogue with families and the potential to train parents in how to read interactively with their child, let them know that the dialogue and that sort of back and forth really makes a difference. So if we can find a way to do that efficiently, I think that will be a huge factor to kind of build up the quality of the reading experience. Format is going to be a big issue too, because that divides parents. I mean, it's like religion and politics. It's like, my child loves their iPad, don't talk to me. I'd never let my child go anywhere near an iPad, it's radioactive. It's just, so anyway. But I think to me, it's a matter of readiness. I think, we make kids wait till they're 16 to drive a car, 18 to vote. There's a time and a place for screens when kids will be able to get more out of them. I mean, they're definitely here to stay, but probably our brains evolved to need real-world experiences to build a foundation. and then once the foundation's in place, then you bring in all the technology, and then it'll have a place. So, but that can be a hard case to make when there's baby apps and other things out there. Anyway, I was going to introduce a few things, like a few books that I wrote that are about dialogic reading, but I don't know if there's time. But basically the case that I'm trying to make with that is that I think there's potential to unite our literacy objectives and health literacy objectives through children's books to promote health, basically by creating books that have a health literacy message that parents will want to read and won't realize that they're getting a health literacy message, but they're getting those sort of healthy things. And I had a couple of examples. Anyone from Tennessee may have seen this book, this Sleep Baby book. This was rolled out in a statewide initiative for SIDS prevention and safe sleep education, and we did a randomized trial that found it works much more effectively than brochures to kind of help get parents to buy in. The power of narrative, parents reading the story, hearing the story from the child's point of view, that sort of cozy, cuddly feeling around a book can really make a difference in terms of empowering them to make some changes for their child's health. And we've got some other ones that we've done about reading to babies from birth. And this is a dialogic reading book that we did, that we're modeling dialogic reading through the story by reading about dogs and cats, which is kind of fun. And this is another series we did about screen time called Baby Unplugged. But anyway, that's a lot of fun. All right, I won't get too wide on that, but I want to thank everybody. This is sort of the people I thank the most, sort of my dad on the left who read to me when I was little, and my mom on the right who read to me, and then my daughters in there who I love to read too. So if it weren't for them, I wouldn't do what I'm doing. And my mentors here, but anyway, that's all I've got. And I don't know if we want to ask questions now or at the very end.
Yeah, we can go ahead and do some questions now if you want.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for engaging with Sarah Bellers.
Any questions?
Can you go back to the books page, because we were trying to write down some of those titles?
Sure.
And do you have any with you?
I do. I have a couple. So basically, where I'm coming at here is I basically, what we're hoping to really, we know that parents, narrative, by getting parents reading with their kids and sort of connecting the dots between the story and in these, this Read Baby Every Day, for example, is basically the child telling the parent, read to me, but basically in essence, read to me every day, and then someday I will read to you. And it sort of talks about, sort of almost like showing them that if you engage with me through language, through reading a story, then this is going to be meaningful and it really matters to me. And it's not us beating the parents over the head and saying, read to your child, read to your child, read to your child. You sort of grab the opportunity of using the book to get that message across just through the story itself. And I think there's some potential there, just especially in sort of the first few months when parents will sometimes get a little uncertain about why am I reading to my child. They're not getting anything out of it. And it's probably true, they're not understanding the story, they're hearing, but what they're getting out of it is that nurturing experience, that they're hearing language, they're benefiting from that routine of reading, but you can get a message to the parent in the meanwhile. So if you get them reading books that are sort of have a secondary message, then maybe that's a useful thing. The other one is the dialogic is sort of the issue with that is just called dogs. The second one is, of course, called cats, but I thought cats should have a period instead of an exclamation point, because cats don't get that excited. And I got shot down by my editor. But anyway, basically each spread in that book is a different type of prompt that a parent can use to get their child engaged in the book. It's sort of asking questions. Where is the cat sleeping? On a lap. Grandma's lap. Let's say black cat on grandma's lap. And it's sort of like, we're not giving them a brochure saying here's how to do it. We're modeling it through the story itself. So anyway, so there's that. And then the Baby Unplugged is a series that, this is the first thing I ever did before I even went into research. I got very annoyed with how many, it was sort of the Baby Einstein phenomenon that so many of the books were encouraging parents to watch videos or to let their children watch too many videos. They're supposed to teach them all these skills. but maybe Unplugged, each one is about a different real-world activity that doesn't involve screens. You're playing with cardboard boxes, balls, pets, things like that. And it's basically, all these reinforce AAP guidelines, but it's not us telling parents what to do, it's them reading about how fun these things are. So anyway, but yeah, that's my other job. I don't do neuroscience.
On the back of many of our Imagination Library books, there are reading tips. Would those be classified as dialogue? It's a new term to me. Dialogic reading, or is it guided reading, or some combination thereof?
The tips on reading on the handouts that Imagination Library uses are all very much in the same category. Getting kids excited about reading, building routines, helping letting them help pick books, getting them involved. Dialogic is a specific method. It involves an acronym called that's in the weeds too. It's basically a series of prompts. The acronym is CROWD. It's completion prompts, recall prompts, open-ended questions, WH questions, and distancing prompts. It's basically, in essence, asking lots of questions and asking how the story relates to the child's life. But a good website that mentions that shows those is called Get Ready to Read, and it's got a whole bunch. And Reading Rockets is another one that both detail a lot of exactly what is dialogic reading and how does it work. We're actually doing a study now. It's actually based in Connecticut. I'm leading it. We're looking at an app that's going to help model dialogic reading through some videos embedded in there. And of course, me being the screen time, like, what are we doing? But anyway, but hopefully it'll be useful. A good way to get the material in the parents' hands.
One more?
Does singing have the same effect with the cuddling and all that? Seems somewhat easier for parents sometimes.
I think so. I think that really, back to that first slide, books are a great catalyst. Books are a great way to sort of get the parent and child together and to bring new words into the conversation, the words that are in the book, and to create a conversation that might not ordinarily come into the day-to-day life for the parent and child. But singing is absolutely a time-tested, wonderful activity, especially for the younger babies. It's definitely a very nurturing experience, absolutely.
How about a hand for Dr. Hutton? So as I mentioned at the beginning, Dr. Hutton is in Cincinnati and works with Cincinnati Children's. And we have a really exciting development in Cincinnati with the Imagination Library, Reach Out and Read, that Elizabeth, who is still on her way, by the way, helped catalyze. But Dr. Szumlas is with Cincinnati Children's and really oversees this work on a day-to-day basis and is very, very familiar with it. So I want to let him tell you a little bit more about it and his experience with it there locally and sort of the social impact approach to all of this that Elizabeth helped catalyze. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Greg Szumlas.
All right, so we All right, so Elizabeth isn't here. Elizabeth has a lot of background in her presentation, which you would have already gotten. So we're going to kind of put the cart in front of the horse here, and I'm going to improvise a lot, and we're going to fly by the seat of my britches, you would say here. So what I'm going to talk about is AE, after Elizabeth, and when Elizabeth gets here later this afternoon, she'll talk about what happened before I met her. And like you heard, she came up with this amazing plan to bring the Imagination Library to Cincinnati and to hopefully get it paid for sustainably. When I met Elizabeth, she came to me and she said, I have a problem. I have this program I want to bring to Cincinnati. It's called the Imagination Library. Have you heard of it? And I said, no. And she said, it gets books to kids, and I want to enroll a lot of kids, but I don't know how to find these kids. She said, I heard you have a program called Reach Out and Read that sees kids all the time. And I said, yes. And so that's where this wonderful marriage kind of started. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Reach Out and Read is a literacy promotion program. Just like the Imagination Library, we're trying to get kids to read books, we're trying to get kids to love books. We're targeted at this critical period we've heard about from 0 to 5 when they really need to read books. But Reach Out and Read is targeted at the medical community. So Reach Out and Read really happens in the medical office where we try to weave literacy promotion into all of the fabric of our well child checks. So typically what happens at a Reach Out and Read visit is that the practitioner, whether it's a pediatrician or a family practice doctor or a nurse practitioner, will choose an age-appropriate book to take with them into the room. And in the room, we use the book for several things. First of all, we use it as an assessment tool, because you can tell a lot about a family when you give a child a book when you walk in the room as to what they do with it. So you can see developmental things, we can kind of assess how they feel about reading. And then we, of course, talk about the importance of reading and how you should do it every day. But more importantly, we're able to do a little bit of work, like Dr. Hutton talked about the dialogic shared reading. Kind of, you can assess right there how the family's doing and their comfort. And we show them kind of age-appropriate shared reading or dialogic reading techniques with their child. So we all know that reading with a 6-month-old is a lot different than reading with a 3-year-old. And for a lot of people, it comes naturally, but some families just need a little bit more coaching. So we're able to do that kind of in the moment. And so typically, while we always talk about reading from birth, Reach Out to Read officially starts at 6 months. So we start giving books at checkouts from 6 months through 5 years. So that's about 10 encounters we have with families over time. Yeah, just like with the Imagination Library, there's evidence that it's a proven program. It increases reading, it increases vocabulary, it increases kindergarten readiness. You guys are all very familiar with the Imagination Library statistics. But I think really, both programs have relative strengths and weaknesses. I think Reach Out and Read is an amazing program because we touch the families multiple times over those first 5 years of life. We're hopefully a trusted person in their life, and they kind of listen to us and take the advice to heart. And through Reach Out and Read, we give them about 10 books over the 5 years, so we only get a very small library out there. But the Imagination Library is amazing about getting those books out there, 60 books, as you guys know, and a monthly reminder to the family. So when Elizabeth came to us with the proposal to help her with the Imagination Library, I thought it was almost really the perfect marriage. And so, as you'll hear later when Elizabeth gets here, is the whole basis of the funding is that we can show the schools that it's going to save them money. And so what was really critical to her proposal was to quickly reach children and get them enrolled as fast as we can, because we only have 2 to 3 years to show some progress. So through Reach Out and Read, every day we're touching these kids. Within Cincinnati, we have about 24 clinics that participate in our Reach Out and Read coalition, and we touch children at about 30,000 visits a year. When we went to the coalition, which was already fairly well organized, everybody was really enthusiastic and there was really no pushback at all. Everybody just wanted to enroll children. So we asked our practices to start enrolling children, and we kept our fingers crossed. And our results really were really pretty great. From the beginning, we were enrolling 500 to 800 kids a month. And so we reached our goal of 8,500 kids in about 16 months. It's kind of guesstimated that there's 10,000 children living in poverty within the Cincinnati Public School District, and our goal was to reach at least 85% of them. So we reached that after about 16 months, and at 20 months we surpassed 9,000, and right now we have about 9,300 kids enrolled. Another really important thing for us to do was to enroll children of all ages. because we need some of these kids to be getting to kindergarten within the next 2 years. And the little pie chart, it just kind of demonstrates our success at getting a broad range of ages enrolled. And I think part of the success was not only the enthusiasm of the practices, but when a child was seen in the clinic, say a 6-month-old was there for a visit, we not only enrolled that child, we enrolled the whole family. We enrolled everybody we could at any encounter. And if the cousin had come to the clinic with them that day and their child was in the age range, we enrolled them. We just enrolled everybody we could. We've gotten a pretty good penetration throughout the community. It's probably a little hard to see. There's a dark line that outlines the Cincinnati Public School District, and the scatter plots are our enrollees. The red zones are the high poverty zones of the city, so we have pretty good concentrations in those. Some of the areas are devoid of any enrollees. That's mostly because they're train yards and industrial areas there. And so far, in about our 20 months, we've sent 135,000 books out to the community. So I think a couple of things that really helped with our success is that at no point it was really seen that the programs were in competition. Unfortunately, talking to people since I've been here, I see in some communities where Reach Out and Read and the Imagination Library, because the funding are kind of pitted against each other. Luckily, we did not have to worry about this in Cincinnati. And we just really saw it as a really synergistic partnership. And our hope is that with the synergy of the two programs, that we can hopefully show more of an effect than either a program alone would show. We asked the doctors to talk about the program. Personally, we didn't ask them to fill out the paper, but we asked people to talk about it. I think this is kind of important in our population. There's a lot of, there's some mistrust of the system, especially when you're asking somebody to fill out a paper that has your name, your address, your email, your telephone number. And even with trusted people like office staff and doctors asking people, we had some people that were a little bit wary, but now that the word is out there, we're kind of overcoming that hurdle. I think another really nice thing with our program is that we can see these families on a continual basis, and we continue to talk to them about reading and how to read their books. But not only that, we can also touch base with the families and ask if they're still getting their books. Our population is highly mobile, and even though we ask for an email address and a phone number, they're very rarely correct when you go back to track down the family. So now when I see a kid at his 18-month visit, I can say, are you still getting your books? And they can say, well, no, I moved 3 months ago. We can update their addresses. So we get a lot of address updates through our email and our phone, but we also get a lot straight from our practices. They email and call us and give us a list of people to change their addresses. So we do have a very big formal evaluation of our kindergarten readiness scores that is currently we're undergoing our first small set of kids that reach kindergarten. They were only exposed about a year or so, but we'll see what we have. But we have been asking the question in some of our clinics for quite some time about reading frequency. And at 3 of our clinics that see about 15,000 visits a year, at every well-child check, we ask parents how often they read with their children. And the responses are most days, which is 5 to 7, or rarely, which is less than 2, some days is in the middle. And we've been plotting a run chart of our reading frequency for many years beyond this, and I can tell you at the beginning we were stuck kind of at 48%, and that's where we had been for the past 5 years. Since we started the Imagination Library, it's jumped up to 58%, and it continues to rise. Our amount of rare readers has also gone down from about 10%, and now we're down to 8%, and that too is continuing to decline. And since I get to meet with families every day, I don't have any numbers I can give you, but I know that it's making a difference. As I'm sure all of you guys do when you talk to the families. There's a lot of excitement about the books. The fact that, I give them a book in clinic is really great, but the book going to the home is a whole another dimension. I just see it empowering parents. I see the enthusiasm. I really see a difference in how the families feel about reading. And then every now and then we get something really cute like this is a thank you note we got from a graduate from the Imagination Library who's only in it about a year, but he loved it so much that he sat down with his mom and he wrote us a thank you note. So like I said, Elizabeth has a lot of information about the financials and all the numbers behind our sustainability plan. But if anybody has any questions about just our collaboration with Hutton and Reed, I'd be happy to entertain those.
I'm from West Virginia, and in my 10 years of participating in the program, I've come across some doctors, some pediatricians who are active in Reach Out and Read. And I knew that sounded familiar, and when you started talking about it, it clicked. I approached both of these two of them over my 10 years, and I'm sure there are plenty more, but I approached both of these doctors, and I don't know if it was their unfamiliarity they had with the Imagination Library program. You know, maybe they saw it as competitive, but I offered assistance to help them if they would partner up with me to reach more babies in their active counties. And they shot me down. So I guess my first question is, how is it funded? And would you have any recommendations how I could break those barriers? I would love to marry up with these efforts and reach out to more families in these communities.
So yeah, that's very unfortunate. It's painful to hear stories like that, but I hear them over and over again. And I think a lot of it is just getting the word out in education. And I think over time, as more people become familiar with Imagination Library and Reach Out and Read, and those of us in both organizations help educate people, hopefully we'll break down some of those barriers. Reach Out and Read is similar to the Imagination Library. Everybody's responsible for their own funding, even though there's a national office. And the big cost for Reach Out and Read is books. Some areas have a coordinator, so there is some staff, but it's books. You know, the books for Reach Out and Read, the book budget is like $225 a book, similar to the Imagination Library. So, you know, like for our coalition, the book budget is like $50,000. So, and unfortunately, I think a lot of people are applying to some of the same agencies, the United Ways, and in the same communities. But hopefully, I hope like with opening these doors and more education and conversation, like, you know, it comes more naturally, because it's really sad because programs work together so well.
Thank you.
And Greg, there was the Stanford Social Innovation Review article. Did you see that one? They did a really nice article. I think it was a couple of pages, and it detailed the Imagination Library and Reach Out and Read working in tandem in Cincinnati. We have it as a PDF, and it's a really brief description of that it may provide a great entree for one or the other even. So
That would be great.
we'll make that available.
If I understood you correctly, you said when you give the book during the office visit, you also do some modeling of a good reading behavior. Exactly. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Who does that, and how do they do it, and how much time does it take?
It should be the healthcare provider in the room. And again, we do it at each visit, so we don't take a long time. We do little snippets at each visit. So, routinely, once you weave it into all the other things you talk to parents about, most doctors, I think, can do it within 30 to 60 seconds, just showing them quickly how you share a book with your age child. So it's not a long encounter. Like I said, we have so many other things to talk about, but usually about a minute or so, I would say.
And how do they know what to say at each session? I find this quick modeling intriguing, because I could do it in Walmart.
Exactly. I'll reach out and read providers. We have kind of standardized training. We talk about shared reading techniques and age-appropriate books and guidance and what you should talk to parents about. It does take some practice, too, to get it down.
I know there's some more questions. The myth and the legend, Elizabeth Edwards has arrived, traffic and all. So we'll go maybe a few minutes longer than we normally would for the session, and then of course the session right after this, we're going to have sort of some open discussion. So this can continue perhaps in there as well. But I want to get, Elizabeth came all this way down here, and I want to make sure we get her some time. So ladies and gentlemen, Miss Elizabeth.
Well, hopefully you got a great idea of the Cincinnati model, at least an overview of how these two programs are working together so well in our city. Thanks for switching things around. Perfect. Okay. All right. Well, so to give you a little bit of context, I am not a person who spends a ton of time with the foundation world or with the nonprofit world, except to the extent that normally I'm talking to your chief investment officer. So I am a venture capital investor by training and by trade. I invest in very early stage companies, consumer products and consumer devices. Most of my companies are in New York and San Francisco. Has anyone heard of Peloton, the spinning bike? Oh, good. All right, cool. Well, that was one of my first investments out of our last fund. The reason why our community foundation, our local United Way, and some of our smaller foundations engaged me to get involved in this project several years ago was first and foremost because I'm really passionate about literacy, love to read from a young age. But really, they were trying to engage someone who made a career out of scaling things. Typically, when I invest in a company like Peloton, they have zero revenue. And when we invested in Peloton, that was a $15 million company. Today, they are a $1.2 billion company. And that happened over the course of 3 years. So fast growth is what we're all about. And I sit on the side of the table where we're trying to figure out financing structures to make that possible. And there are a lot of really smart people working on trying to fix this equation in philanthropy, which is that there are no exits in the philanthropic world. In my world, these companies, the growth and the investment that we are putting into them is because we expect 100 times or 1,000 times back, right? When Uber finally goes public, or when Google went public, that made a lot of people a lot of money. And so then they reinvested back into early stage companies again. In the philanthropic world, about 1% of our GDP goes to philanthropy. And so when you think about that, all that you have to do with very little, all that we have to serve, and I'm going to get into all that we have to serve and how crushing that can be, you can see why we focus on this model. So 53% of our kids in Cincinnati are born in poverty, and we're second only to Detroit in that respect. This is not a number that was widely known in our city until I started pitching people that it was a problem. And I was looking for data points because I wanted to sell data and benefits in order to engage bigger wallets. I interviewed a lot of people. One of the big things that came out of this was the problem with poverty is a high mobility rate. People are couch surfing, they're functionally homeless, kids are sleeping in bathtubs or couches, uncle's house, grandma's house, friend's house. And this is really challenging and creating a stable environment where children are ready for kindergarten. So just to give you an idea of the top 100 markets by population in the US, Cincinnati's number 50. We're literally in the middle. We are a mid-sized city. For us, this poverty problem is 10,000 children 0 to 5. It's pretty well concentrated inside the city. Our MSA is much bigger than that, but we're talking about just our city. And I'll go into why that's important. you heard from Dr. Hutton and Dr. Szumlas earlier, and there are many academic studies that we looked at when we were looking at interventions to tackle our poverty, our early literacy crisis, and John had put together a really great synopsis of, oh my gosh, like 15 different academic studies. The barriers that families were citing were lack of access to books, lack of confidence, lack of role modeling. So we first tackled the first one, lack of access to books. So then we went and tried to validate it with local data. Okay, so families are claiming that they don't have books. I mapped all the bookstores. They're right. There are no Barnes & Noble in our poor neighborhoods. And the libraries, there aren't very many of those either. If they are, the nearest one's 3 miles away. If you don't have a car, it's a long walk. So then we looked at actual library data. By the way, you can get this from your library as well. Most of our systems, I know we have a lot of libraries in the room too. Most of our systems incorporate, is this a juvenile book being checked out? Which branch, right? Is it late? So we matched up population. We have over 6,000 children in our poorest neighborhood, Price Hill. Turns out that only 522 children's books were checked out at that branch. So we know that kids are not getting access to books. So this is sort of in venture capital, we have sort of a classic way of searching for companies, screening them, doing, customer calls, site visits. We did all of that. And we identified 2 programs that we thought were just top-notch. And you already know what those are. The way that I think about this in terms of a delivery model or a business model, on the left, we have a low-cost provider that gives total coverage, who is a trusted expert, the pediatrician, but right now they're only giving 1 book per pediatric visit, so that's low dosage. On the right, we have a low-cost, high-quality, also high-dosage provider. So if we combine the 2, we have a delivery model and more frequency. And so our goal was to get a home library of 60 books to all 10,000 low-income children in Cincinnati. And you already saw from Dr. Szumlas' slides that our 3-year goal of reaching 10,000 children, we actually reached in 2, just over 22 months, got 9,300, so it's 93% of our goal in 22 months. So that's awesome, definite coverage. So I think Greg already talked about how this works. Pediatricians are basically writing a prescription for free books, right? Who's going to say no to that? You're sitting in the waiting room, you have nothing else to do. You already know how this wonderful program with Imagination Library works, but we needed a sustainable funding source. Who wants a sustainable funding source? Yeah, hell yeah, all right. So we needed to figure out who was going to pay for this. And so it's very simple, enroll, mail, pay. And that also means we're able to reach 100% of kids fast. We're able to increase the frequency, and we have a budget to spend on it. So why pediatricians? I don't know if Greg shared this slide. Love this. So pediatricians are the only people in the supply chain of young children who see kids under 5, right? When you go into kindergarten, everybody's in an institution, right? K through 12. You are institutionalized at age 5. But before that, you're a free agent. You're very hard to find, right? So we need to find these free agents, who are not yet signed up for cell phone data plans and downloading all kinds of apps. We can track them that way. They are really living off the grid, these kids. So we needed somebody who was interacting with them on a frequent basis. And these well child visits, so I'm the mother of a 17-month-old little girl. I can tell you that first year of visits, oh my God. I mean, every single month and 3 months, gee whiz, like we are in the pediatrician's office all the time. And it's great because that provides that trusted expert time to really build a relationship with that family. And also, because these families move on average more than once a year, to keep those addresses updated. Oh my God. Keeping those addresses updated, you know, you really need feet on the street in order to do that. So we had to figure out a way to pay for it forever. That's what an exit is. Somebody who's going to buy this thing, buy the whole company. And when we think of who's going to buy the benefits that we can create, here's what we can deliver. We know that we can deliver improved kindergarten literacy scores. So incoming kindergartners who have Imagination Library, they're going to have better literacy scores. And the more data we can get around this, the better. We also have this fantastic database of all 10,000 low-income children, really all, you know, we could say all children if we wanted to target more broadly. So whose budget would that really impact? What could we do with that data? Who would care? Would it be the federal government, our state government, our county government, our city, our health system? So what I did was I downloaded years, we really only need 1 year, of everyone's budget to look at where are all the dollars going? Who has like huge pain points, right? Like what is Job and Family Services spending on, you know, early childhood programs right now at all? And so I'm going through these line items and I'm like, gee whiz, the city spends a lot on city streets, right? Garbage collection. Don't have a lot of kids in there. They do have a recreation budget. Okay, I don't think that really goes. Federally, oh man, then we're talking to people like in DC. So we looked at one budget where we could find a lot of savings. If we improve kindergarten literacy scores, doesn't that save them some money? Don't they have areas of their budget where we can impact if kids are ready for school? And so then we drilled down a little bit deeper and we figured out that we could actually give them a lot of benefits. So not only can we deliver better incoming literacy scores, we can help get these kids to school on time. This is what, when I was talking to the superintendent of the school system, like the first interview, I said, Mary, what's the biggest problem? Is it teachers? She said, no, it's poverty. Half the kids that come to our school are like really, really poor. And they don't have transportation. And they have no idea what's going on. They're very much out of touch with, hey, by the way, school starts before Labor Day. We have uniforms now. You need to be vaccinated before you come. And guess what? You have to get in touch with us before you show up. You need to enroll in the school. And we can help you figure out, too, which schools in your neighborhood, or it may be that you need to be in a specialty school, or you want to be in a specialty school. Maybe you want to be in the foreign language school. It's across town, but we can figure out transportation for you. But parents didn't even know that they should get in touch or how to get in touch. And so it created a big problem for the school district because half the kids were coming to school a week late or 2 weeks late. And then once they got there, they're arriving, you know, kind of on this rolling basis. They had to move teachers around to different classrooms, different schools. It was impacting families too. You had angry teachers who were getting hired, fired, and moved. You had families who were being moved, kids who were starting with one kindergarten teacher and then ending up with another kindergarten teacher. Oh my God, I don't know about you, when I went to kindergarten, that was enough stress. You know, that was enough of an adjustment. So we could deliver improved communication with hard-to-reach families, and we can also help the school district predict where these families were going to end up. Because even if they weren't actively reaching out, look, I'm a mom, got a lot going on. I know that like, the last thing you want to do is like fill out this form and send it in or call the number. Totally get it. But at least they know my address. They know I'm probably gonna end up at the school that's 2 blocks from my house. So, this has actually been studied. This is one of the many charts from Campaign for Grade Level Reading. They do such a great job. Coincidentally, chronic absence is also something that leads to lower reading scores. This is at the 5th grade level. I mean, anyway, it's like kindergarten, 3rd grade, 5th grade. You gotta go to school, you have to come prepared, and you have to show up and show up frequently and on time. So the attendance challenge was actually a bigger challenge for the public school because they realized, like, look, once kids actually show up, we do a good job. So just get them here. So what we did was we drilled into that budget and created a sensitivity table. You can do this too. So this is very specific to Cincinnati. And I'll tell you about the specific issues here. We have a cost of reading specialists. I know how much we're paying reading specialists in Cincinnati and how many we have in our district based on our need. It may be different, slightly different in your community, right? Maybe you pay them $75, maybe we pay them $50, I don't know. Maybe you have a lot of kids that are in need, maybe you have few. So that is, an issue here. But what we did was we looked at the 10,000 children who are incoming, put them by cohort, so class, right? 2,000 per class. The number that are not ready in Cincinnati is 751 out of the 2,000, just to give you an idea, right? We knew that if we improved kindergarten readiness by 4.31%, that would be our break even for the Reach Out and Read plus Imagination Library program. Because this program is so cheap. It's so amazing. $25 per kid per year. Oh my God. This is where all my money's going. We also have another cost in Ohio, which is the 3rd grade reading guarantee, which means that if you are not testing at a 3rd grade level, you're held back. There's an actual cost. It's an extra school year. You could argue, whether this is a realized cost or not, because maybe you're not actually tacking on a 2nd senior year. Maybe you're just not graduating. Another way to think about that cost. But it is a real cost to the district. They are measured on this. So those two things added up, $7,700, $729, to almost $8,000 per student at the district level. So this is, you've got $5,000 or almost $6,000 of reading specialists, kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, working with these kids, right, trying to get them back up to speed, trying to catch them up, and kids that are just beyond the pale, right? Kids that, we sank so many resources and they still are held back. So total district savings, $250,000, easy, right? Divide by 10,000, that's your 25. So this is like the dollars and cents. This is if the Cincinnati Public School District auditor comes around and goes, wait a second, you guys are spending money. You're not allowed to do that. But the real savings, it's due to better kindergarten attendance. It's the brain damage. You know what? Like, Mary Ronan, superintendent at Cincinnati Public Schools, she was really excited to get, books in the hands of kids. She would tell me, the kids that are coming have never held a book before. You get to kindergarten, they pick them up, they're like this, right? So she knew that it would be hugely helpful to have this home library for students, but for her, the benefit for her is dealing with angry teachers and angry families and upset kids. So if we can take that, that's the big benefit, right? Like, stories, facts tell, stories sell. 90% of purchasing is emotional. Mary is looking at that going like, oh my God, I'm not gonna get angry calls. what's the price of that? Priceless, right? Great. Fewer angry calls, so better enrollment forecasting. And then we can do so many other things with this. So we really had to make sure, though, before we sank $1 million into this, that we were going to hit our goal. So I worked with the group from Middletown, and this is what's so fantastic about this group. You are sharing best practices. You're going to hit it out of the park. So I knew that if we hit our 4.31% goal, no one would ever stop funding this program. So I looked at a community that's one neighborhood north, Middletown, and I pulled up their Ohio Department of Education stats. And Dwayne and I had met, and he gave me the whole rundown on Imagination Library, so I knew how cool it was. But I needed to find out, okay, after implementation, what was the impact on student scores? And do we really have enough wiggle room here? So this crawl is our kindergarten readiness assessment, and this, band 1, assess broadly for intense instruction. Those are kids that are pulled aside for reading specialists. Those are kids that, upon coming into kindergarten, and probably other specialists as well, but upon coming into kindergarten, need a lot more help to get up to speed. So you see from 2005-06 school year, where you've got 50-ish% of the kids who are assessed at band 1, that number drops drastically between 20-30% by the 2013-14 school year. So I was like, seems like a pretty good, I think we can do 4.31%. By the way, they hadn't even yet gotten to 100% coverage, right? So if we had 100% coverage, what would that number look like? So this is, just another way of, saying what outcomes we expected. Those beautiful libraries, improved literacy scores, larger vocabularies, better communication. Better communication with incoming kindergarten parents about enrollment, immunizations, school start, and real dollars and cents savings for Cincinnati Public School District. So how's this different? This is a sustainable funding model. You don't need to go raise more money every year. You do a 3-year pilot, or less, or more, and you demonstrate those benefits. 100% coverage. You are never going to reach 100% of families unless you have a wicked, door-knocking campaign without the help of pediatricians. And by the way, don't we trust our pediatricians more than anyone? They know what's best for the kids. So I listen to my pediatrician. It's cost-effective. It's evidence-based. You have 2 nationally recognized evidence-based literacy programs. Better communication, better data. And with this wonderful donor recognition, even if you can't convince your school district, maybe you can convince a corporate sponsor. So this crazy slide is all of the, if I could have anything I wanted and use the database to implement that, what could we do? So I really saw this database that we were building out as the gateway into better everything. Better health and literacy information for families. So some people like to consume information on the go, right? Some people like to read things in the mail. Better screening. There are so many great organizations that are working on this. The more you can screen kids earlier, for issues, the more you can, the better you can address. We have all of these great ongoing events at our library, parent groups. Now we have universal preschool in Cincinnati, and getting the word out about that even is an issue. So letting parents know where the quality preschools are. This is a pipeline, right? You have this beautiful baby. You really do need the information at your fingertips when you need it, because there's so much going on, no matter who you are. And then, pre-K, K-12 enrollment. So we have all these fantastic providers. We have, home visiting providers. We have our wonderful library, and we have all of these wonderful social service providers. Things like maternal depression, another project that's going on at Cincinnati Children's. If mom's having trouble, so is baby. So if we can really use this as a pipeline to connect better to our families and connect them with things that they want, we'll all be better for it. So it's low cost, it's high coverage. You got to find somebody with a budget to spend. In so many cases, that will be your public school. And there are so many ways to tack on these great programs. So I don't want to make it sound like this is just like turn it on, but it really is. You do. We have templates for all this, and Jeff and I have worked on this with Cleveland a little bit. I mean, we have all this stuff. We have spreadsheets. We have a memorandum of understanding that we signed with our public school district. We have how we positioned it to them. So the basic things that you're going to need to do. By the way, who wants to do this? Who wants to try it? We're doing it. Right. Yes. Okay. Let's do it. So first, you have to find your local Reach Out and Read organization, and hopefully they're active, and hopefully they have really good coverage, and a willingness to try this out. You're going to need some local data. Most of this is public. I think all of it's public information. So your school district budget, talk to your superintendent, talk to usually they have team captains for the, K through 3. So your K through 3, reading lead, or just your K through 3 lead. You're going to need those kindergarten readiness scores from your State Department of Education. I mean, our state, Ohio, ODE, it's all online. You could literally go down to the school level because it's all this open data. And then, you could do other pieces of data that will help build your case. Go to your public library, find out how many children's books are being checked out in your toughest neighborhoods. And this is a good way, because a lot of times, our business community, and I saw this a lot, I had to go get the data about poverty, I had to go get the data about the libraries because they just didn't believe it, right? That these families didn't have books. So, calculate the savings, we've got a template for that. Create a contract or a memorandum of understanding at the outset. You need your 3-year pilot funder. I know there are a lot of funders in the room. You're already basically the pilot funder, right? You need a program evaluator. So for us, that's a great PhD at Cincinnati Children's that when we were working to put together this kind of unique data sharing agreement, this is sensitive data. These are people's home addresses, their cell phone numbers, their email. I don't know about you, but I would be livid if that were shared. It's also connected to their score. So we have a special enrollment form, just like when you sign up regularly for Imagination Library, but you're going to have to sign this little, hey, I agree to participate in this program, and I know that my child is going to be measured on their literacy scores. But I'm getting free books or whatever. And we also have to have a special contract with the folks who are going to be sharing this data. And really, for us, it's Cincinnati Children's Hospital and Imagination Library. And Cincinnati Children's is like, your hospital control. They know HIPAA, right? They know how to control data. They don't let you know your own medical records, right? So, we have a way of doing that. So, we're blessed because in our community, our children's hospital and our public school already have data sharing agreements going. They're already working together, and I'm sure they are in your community too. But you just have to be able to measure it, right? Because some auditor in 3 years is going to come around going like, we're spending $500,000 on kids' books? What? So to be able to show, hey, this is so that we can avoid $1.5 million in reading specialists, okay? So, back off. And this is my last slide. I'm so happy to be here. I think that you guys are doing the great work, the most important work. If there's anything that I can do to help, if you need me to come to your community and sit across the table from your superintendent, I will do that. So thank you so much.
They have it going on in Cincinnati. Thank you so much. Elizabeth, Dr. Hutton, Dr. Szumlas, thank you guys so much for coming today. I know you have questions. Anybody have any questions? I'll tell you what, let's do. Let's take questions for 5 minutes, and then we'll take a 15-minute break and come back in here. Can you guys stick around for a few minutes, or you need to get on the road? You stick around? And if there's any more questions, any more discussion that we want to have after that, when we're back in here, we'll start off with that, and then we'll get into our team discussion. Sound like a plan? Okay.
Well, I'm thrilled with how successful it's been since they came to talk to us in Middletown.
Couldn't have done it without you.
Yeah, I think I related to, or when we first started it, we were part of United Way of Greater Cincinnati, and their response was, well, we won't do Imagination Library for Middletown because it's not scalable to do it for all of Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
But you proved them wrong.
Yeah, and that scalability, it's portable. I don't think that we're going to have to do endless pilots, around the country in order to prove this out. And the basically the gatekeeper there is how much risk does our little funding collaborative want to take on at the outset? And so they felt like 3 years of supporting 10,000 children, we'll see how it goes, and then try and go and replicate it.
But what I was wondering about was, is there a specific part of the school district budget where the funding is coming from? Is it Title I dollars? Is it somewhere else specifically in the budget, or just general dollars that they're using?
Yeah, that's a really good question. This is tied to savings. So this structure is actually very similar to what's called it's a pay for success contract. If you've heard of a social impact fund, these like unicorns that exist, and we're always trying to make them happen, but we need like Merrill Lynch or Goldman Sachs to come in and like lend us $1 bajillion. The role that the funding collaborative is playing is really that Goldman Sachs role in the social impact bond world. Enough of a demonstration budget, but the Cincinnati Public School District is already realizing savings. So, as we go along, we'll have a look back to show the savings, and that way, it's basically coming out of
General fund.
Yeah.
Isn't it called school readiness? I feel like the 0 to 3 ECE is all getting ready for kindergarten, and in Colorado it's called school readiness. It seems like that's the budget that it would.
I have heard so many, the question was, isn't it called school readiness, kindergarten readiness, school readiness? Each state has a different incoming evaluation. And actually there are many evaluations, as many of you well know, along the way. Sometimes DIBELS is used. Like, there are so many different assessments kind of going into to kindergarten. And there's social emotional. Literacy is obviously a big component. This is really about literacy. But, the slide that I showed, the sort of spaghetti and meatballs of different organizations, those can obviously support some of the social and emotional aspects, not what we're doing.
Hi. So I'm from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. We have a very large entrepreneurial community and very successful startup accelerator. And so we have a real strong network of venture capitalists, and I'm intrigued by utilizing a venture capitalist / venture philanthropist to scale what we hope to start as an Imagination Library program in 2018. Do you know of other venture philanthropists or networks that we might be able to connect to have this experience in our own community?
So there's, the only other model that I'm really familiar with as a venture philanthropy model, because we kind of invented in Cincinnati that term when we were talking to people, because everyone, in my world is in the venture capital world, mostly outside of Cincinnati, even though we have a lot of VCs in Cincinnati also. And here, we were talking about scaling, philanthropic dollars and creating exits or, a transition plan. I think that, so the other model out of Boston is called Greenlight. They're a different model in that they're not literacy focused. They kind of go into a community and say, hey, what kind of problems are you guys having? And let's figure out what we want to address. And the only real tie to the venture world there is the founder, who's a friend of mine, John Simon, and he's a VC. He's still an active VC, just like me. He felt very strongly and similarly that in the philanthropic world, dollars to scale weren't, coming fast enough. I would actually engage, definitely engage your venture community, because a lot of times we have like hackathons. We just had a heroin hackathon in our city, trying to bring these, creative minds, and I do think it's a great idea. The guy who invented basically the tools for navigation, so figuring out where you are in the middle of the ocean using a compass and longitudinal navigation, was a watchmaker. A lot of times you take somebody from a totally different environment who's not sort of has the mindset of what are the barriers. The barrier is this woman, Dorothy. She says no to everything. If you just don't know that and you're going in, it's like, why? Let's not listen to Dorothy. Who cares, right? So part of that, and then also just having a totally different approach. So I think, the VCs, could help, but also the other group that could help too, in thinking through some of these things, is the social impact fund community. So social impact, there's, what's the other one? Two of them are out of Boston. Anyway, these pay for success contracts are becoming more and more of a thing. And so finding finance people, get an accountant on your team, get somebody who's like fine with drilling through an income statement, a balance sheet, cash flow, capital budgets versus operating budgets. Dwayne's question about like, hey, does this come out of general funds? Like those types of things, that's actually, it's really important. Sometimes you're going to need a specific line item, other times not so much.